Hey, Zaka family. Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Elvin Colón, who is Director of Mergers and Acquisitions, Corporate Development at American Express. Elvin, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Paul, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. I know that there's a lot of catching up that we got to do, but, I really want the listeners to know a little bit more about your background and where you come from first. So if you could just kind of give us a little bit of a background check on like where your family's from, culturally wise, like where you guys migrated from.
Yeah, sure. So I was born in the U.S. Don't want to say what year, but many years ago. But yeah, so I was born in the U.S. My family's actually from the Dominican Republic. Both my parents immigrated here when they were, I think, in their teenage years, more or less, and settled in the Washington Heights area of New York City. So that's actually where I was born and spent kind of the first early years of my life in Washington Heights. My family's there. I still have plenty of cousins, relatives still in that area, as well as back in DR. And then when I was young, we sort of kind of transitioned out to New Jersey, which is where I spent the better part of my childhood growing up, in a small town called Carteret. And I'd say for my parents, coming over as immigrants in their teens, I've heard the stories from them, like they barely spoke any English and kind of just came here and try to get settled and sort of assimilate into American life as best as they can, going to school and trying to sort of make a better life. It's not uncommon for people from the Dominican Republic to come to the U.S. seeking, better opportunities. It's no secret that, it's a sort of challenged economy for many people and not a lot of opportunities. So, for them, it was kind of a step up to come here, and then, they've made a best in terms of raising a family here. So I think early on, I have very fond memories of growing up with, my parents, both sort of blue collar professionals, working class. My father, went to graduate high school, went into the Army for a couple of years. And then post that, entered the Iron Workers Union within New York City and was there for the next 35 years. My mother graduated high school and went to, I think at the time it was called secretarial school, and then, got a job out there and stayed with the same firm, I think, for 35 years as well. So I think back then that was sort of the trend, especially for, minorities and people of color, just trying to find stable opportunities where you can provide for your family and sort of live a comfortable life. So I think that was, for them, that was kind of the path, and I think it provided really great opportunities for them to provide for their families, especially my sister and I.
So it's just you and your sister, right? You saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have one older sister.
Got you. Now, did you ever go back home to DR at any point in time in your younger childhood?
Yeah, we used to go back every couple of years just to visit family and kind of do the rounds. I think last time I was there was 2019. But I think as, when we went, it was kind of different back in the day because, to be quite honest, most of my relatives there are poor. And so it's just not like the ideal sort of travel environment for us when we go there, right? So, but we do make the rounds. I know my parents definitely go back more often than I do at this stage, but yeah, we do definitely try to see our family, and a lot of them are able to come here now to the States to visit us.
And when you talk about your family, you said that a little bit more back home, the main differences in regards to like their finances, like how is the community back home versus like being in like Washington Heights? Because I know Washington Heights is definitely heavily populated with a Spanish community. So like, what is like the big difference?
I just think it's even less mean in DR. Really, is the difference, right? Like I can perfect example. I can recall, going back. I think when I was probably, I don't know, I was probably like 12 or 13. So we went back to Santiago, which is where my family's from, and I was able to see kind of where my mom lived. And I kid you not, it was just literally shacks with dirt floors. And that's, you can kind of get a sense of the difference between kind of where they came from in DR to even where they were in Washington Heights. It's just incredibly different.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, your childhood and obviously where you now your adulthood. I'm assuming at some point in time your Dominican background has influenced you. At some point in time, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I think for me, I do recognize, I've always been strong with my parents have always, and my family's always instilled our heritage and our sort of culture within kind of our everyday lives, whether the food we eat, obviously speaking Spanish, the types of events we go to, the types of celebrations that we hold in events, things like that. But I think it's just more of like always trying to instill sort of the work ethic within my sister and I in terms of making us sort of strive to achieve our best. Right? And so kind of instilling that work ethic within us.
And that's something that obviously your parents had shown you at a young age, you migrating here for a better life for their two kids and showing you how strong their work ethic was. Like you said, they didn't even speak English, coming into America. That obviously must have been a significant challenge. Then you and your sister obviously went to school and you got a good amount of that knowledge. I'm assuming at some point in time you had to kind of teach your parents, English as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I did. My parents picked up English because they were young enough when they were here, right? I would say that they speak English pretty well, despite Spanish being their first language, right? So they were able to kind of assimilate and spend enough time here in their early years to kind of get up to learn English and really get up to speed. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think from there, one of the things that they instilled in us was just the importance of education. That was sort of the path to just more opportunities in life. Like they stressed really hard education on my sister and I growing up, and really pushed us to try to do our best in school and achieve high marks. And really everything we do.
And from a lot of the people I've interviewed on the show, a lot of them that are coming from the Korean background, they always emphasize about how their parents always like instill the whole thing about education and how education was potentially going to change the game for themselves and potentially for their family. So you guys obviously taking an interest into that, and it kind of helps you guys out, in your career. How did it feel to when you graduated from high school going into college? Like, talk about that experience. Like you were in Jersey at that time, right?
Yeah, I was. It's actually interesting. So when it came to college, I'll be honest, I had no idea what to do. I just really didn't. And the reason why is because I think I didn't have anyone that sort of to kind of go to talk to about that process. Like, what do you do? Okay, I've got good grades in high school, and I think I graduated top 10% of my class. But like, I just really wasn't sure what the next step was. Like, where do you go? Do you go to college? Do I go to a trade school? I even thought about, my like I said, my father had served in the military. I was like, hey, do I go the military route? So I definitely didn't have any idea what I wanted to do when I was graduating. High school, to the point where I remember one of my guidance counselors was asking me, like, what schools did you apply to? This was like going into like the latter half of my junior year, and I said none. She's like, are you serious?
Wow.
And I said, yeah. And I think she rushed me to get like at least an application into I think Rutgers University, which is obviously the big state university in New Jersey at the time. She's like, here's their deadline's coming up. Yeah, at least apply there or something like that. And then that's when I kind of started thinking about what are some other schools I should be looking at as far as college. But yeah, no, it was all very new to me, right? I was the first person in my family to go to college, let alone and then ultimately graduate from college. So I didn't have, my parents have always been very supportive of my academics, but I mean, they didn't navigate it themselves, right? So they were learning as I was going through it at the same time, like filling out FAFSA forms and all that stuff. They were learning on the fly just as I was. Yeah. And so I think for them, like they just trusted my gut, right? And they said, we visited a couple of schools, and ultimately I went to Sacred Heart University in Connecticut, where got the privilege to meet you guys as well. And a large part of the driver is good academic school, but also still gave me a chance to play football in college.
Now, when you were in college, or even when you were in high school, when did you start to focus on your career and like know that you were passionate about it? Could you talk to us a little bit more about the process and like the education behind it?
Yeah. So my first major, I will tell you how it came. My first major when I enrolled at Sacred Heart was computer science, and it was, I kid you not, my mother came up to me and said, "You should study computer science." I didn't know what it was or anything. It was like, okay. That's how I became a computer science to start. And I think I took one semester of computer science, found it interesting, but then realized really quick, I was like, this is not for me. Like, it just didn't fit my personality. I just wasn't interested in it. And so then I kind of went back to the drawing board, and I had no idea. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, like, honestly. And so I think I picked a general major just to give myself some options. And I ended up being a business management major. And then I want to say kind of by the time I was a junior year, I started to think about, all right, well, what am I going to do? And I just had a chance happening with I was able to meet like someone who was like a C-level executive at a company. I was talking to him, and he was a CFO. And I think one piece of advice that he gave me was like, you should try to get something analytical for your background, to help set yourself up for the future. And I thought, well, I'm a junior now. Like, I don't want to stay beyond my 4 years. Like, how am I going to get the credit? How am I going to get the credit to pick up something more analytical? But it just so happened that I was able to pick up sort of finance as a second major and still graduate on time. So that's how I ended up getting into finance my junior year and declaring it as a second major. Just a really chance conversation that I had that sort of piqued my interest. I saw this guy who's obviously doing really well, had pursued a finance and accounting path, and I thought, maybe this is something worth exploring. But yeah, I didn't really start thinking about my career probably till late junior year of college. I think a lot of people go in thinking that, oh man, I need to have it all figured out when I'm 18, my freshman year. And I mean, you change so much in those 4 years of college.
Yeah, college. It's they always say those are a very influential. Obviously, every year is influential in your life, but college is big because you're so exposed to so many different avenues, so many different lanes.
Yeah.
Like, and you're that close to the source. You're that close to someone who's working in the field right now, currently, versus being like, down the line, I want to be a doctor, but don't know any doctors. So it's definitely an eye opener. Like, now, obviously, graduating from college, you picked your major, you're in it, you learned about it, you feel very driven and focused on it. Like, talk to us a little bit more about your first job out of college. Like, what was that like? What were some of like the biggest takeaways from your experience with it?
Yeah, so I guess to take a step back, when I was that junior year, when I guess when I started to think about like, what do I want to do? What do I like? I liked music and entertainment. So I started doing internships. I did 3 internships before we graduated. My first one was with Universal Music Group, actually, in the city. I did a summer internship with there. I was like, hey, I don't think I'm a singer or have the talent to be an artist, but maybe there's something on the business side that I can get into that could be really interesting, right? Like all these really cool industries, right? Like there's a business side to all of it, right? And so maybe that's something that I can get into. So interned with Universal Music Group, really great experience. After that, I interned with MTV Network, doing I think like production management with them. And then after that, I did just sort of a traditional finance internship with a firm in Westport, Connecticut that did like capital leases for property.
Mm-hmm.
So then I thought, okay, let me stick with the theme. And so my first job out of undergrad was with Univision, which is the Spanish language network. So I was doing accounting for them. Great experience. Got to be in New York City right out of undergrad. Great firm, obviously well known. And then just kind of sort of obviously with my Hispanic background, sort of fit right in. Really great experience. But my role at the time was just, I was sort of an entry level accounting role, and primarily data entry. And it just wasn't, once again, it wasn't just a fit. It wasn't a fit for me. I tend to think like, I like to think that I'm outgoing and personable, and the idea of sitting in a cubicle doing data entry for most of the day was just not very appealing. So after that, I just started to think about what else do I want to do? And it was actually during that time that I started researching like finance career paths. So you can imagine, here I am, I graduated undergrad, and I still don't know what I'm doing. Like I still don't know what I want to do. I just took a job to have a job because that's what you did back then, right? Yeah, I just need to pay bills and make money now that I've graduated. And I started researching careers, and I thought, corporate finance is interesting. What do people do? And that's where I kind of started to learn more about Wall Street and investment banking. And then it just opened up a whole new world for me. I thought, wow, here's this like world I had no idea about that, provides tremendous opportunities in terms of economic opportunities and real career growth for individuals.
Now, when it comes down to that stuff, like what makes it so? Why are you so passionate about finance and accounting? Like what attracts you to it?
I think what attracts me to kind of finance and more like financial services, I would say it's very. I think it's a meritocracy, more or less, right? Like you get the better performers, the better you perform, the more you're rewarded, and that can determine your career. Right? You get out what you put in. I think that's what I like about it. You've heard of the term "you eat what you kill." Like, there's a good opportunity to really take control of your career within financial services if you're passionate enough about it, and that's what I think I like.
Now, I noticed in your bio, this is something that definitely caught my eye, and I know that the listeners are going to love it too. You work for several big companies like Goldman Sachs, Citibank. You touched on a lot of corporate big names. Like, talk to me about that. Yeah. How is it being in those positions? Whether it be entry level or you climbing up the ladder. Like, how did it feel to and some of the challenges you face, advocating for yourself and for like the minorities within there?
Yeah. So, part of it was, when I figured out that, hey, investment banking is something that I wanted to pursue, I had to learn a lot about it. And what I didn't know was that it's very hard to get into, right? If you don't go to the right undergrad institution or the right graduate institution, like there's very few entry points, at least at the, you're talking early 2000s, at that time, if you didn't go to Ivy League or very select universities, it was very hard to get into investment banking. One, there were only a couple of true investment banks, right? This is, Lehman, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs before it converted to a bank holding. Like there were only a couple of true investment banks. And then you had some bank holding companies like Citi and JP Morgan that were traditional banks with investment banking services, right? So I figured out, well, I missed the opportunity in undergrad because I didn't know about this. Like I just didn't know that this career path existed or was an option. And so I had a plan for my next entry point, which was going back for an MBA and trying to get in as an MBA associate and lateral over that way. And so after I left Univision, I went to Goldman in their wealth management division just to get financial services experience, right? And that was really interesting because it was providing financial planning advice to corporate executives So here I am, probably 23, 24 years old, talking to very established people with high net worth individuals with several $1 million into the tens of hundreds of millions of net worth, and just me giving them advice on certain things in connection with my account manager that I supported. So really great experience. It was like my first introduction into financial markets, into financial management, investing. Like these are all things that I really hadn't picked up prior to, and this was a great crash course into sort of these very important life skills that I don't think people give enough attention to at an earlier stage of their lives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then you've also got to imagine that within sort of these finance roles, right? Like there aren't a lot of people of color in senior level roles. To be quite frank,
mm-hmm.
I think business fields, financial services in general, have had some trouble recruiting minority candidates to senior level positions, and so it's still, I think, still to this day, it's still a challenge, and there's definitely firms trying to make a bunch of efforts and initiatives to improve that track record, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I think one of the hardest part was finding people that look like me that I can sort of confide in and have sort of that mentor-mentee relationship. Because I think that's really, really important, because if you talk to most people that have done really well within their career, they'll tell you that, one of the biggest things they had was they had someone that they could go to, a great mentor that helped guide them along their journey, someone who was at the firm, a senior level person who's at the firm vouching for them, pounding the table like, hey, give my person an opportunity. And so I think that's always harder, and it's not as natural, right, when there aren't as many people that you can kind of relate to or connect with more on a personal level.
Yeah, that is it is essential to have someone, being like a good mentor to you or a good role model, especially when you're really passionate about something and you want to kind of incline. That's something a lot of the guests on the show had said, even for themselves, that was one thing that they look for, within their journey. Now, I know that one of the biggest questions that we always get, from our listeners, and something that we always try to address, a lot of times the guests on the show, they bring it up to our attention. One of the hardest things people find in their journey of being in corporate America is like really finding a way to have their voice be heard, right? So a question I'm going to ask you is this, how did you find your voice in a bigger company? And like, what are some of the ways you would recommend someone to kind of like stepping out, to kind of making sure their voice is being heard?
Yeah. So I think this is one of those things that, even to this day, I still have to be very thoughtful about how I approach this, right? Because it's not as easy for me even, but I think you just have to put yourself out there, like raise your hand, right? And don't be afraid of the blowback or the critique or being called out, right? One of the things, the feedback that I get, even when I have discussions with my leaders, is like making sure you have presence in a room with people that are your peers or even those more senior than you, to make sure that you're getting your voice heard, right? You got to raise your hand for initiatives, and just make sure that you're raising your hand and saying, hey, I want to take on X role, or if there's an important presentation, like, hey, I want to present part of this presentation. Or if you have a view, presenting that view, right? Like I've known, you say, hey, this is a bad way. I don't like the way we're doing something. Let me put together some materials to see why I think, one, it's not the right way to do it, or here's my suggestions for you, right? Like it's not great to present the problem. It's, the better way at first is like, identify the problem, but then provide some solutions and show people that you're taking that initiative to try to kind of help the firm move forward. It's just about taking more risk and getting outside of your comfort zone. Right? It took me a while to get comfortable presenting and leading client meetings, but after some time, after multiple reps, you just get more and more comfortable and you start to improve. Right? This is all all about relationship and connecting with people, and you just got to
True.
be able to get more comfortable in that environment and just being comfortable with who you are and being confident in what you're saying has value.
Mhm. And I know that the do you feel like your Latin culture kind of helps you when it comes to creating those relationships?
I think it depends. It depends if there's other people in the room that share that. And, that's where, I think the good thing about larger firms is that I think they do a much better job of creating diverse work work environments. And so it's easier to make that connection, right? Because people that may not even be exactly my background, but share similar backgrounds, you can definitely still have that same connection. And that's one of the things when I've been fortunate when, whether you're, Black, Hispanic, Indian, Asian, like we can all find similarities in terms of the shared experiences that we've probably had to go through to navigate our careers at large firms, right? And so the more diverse a workforce, I think the better to create those connections. Unfortunately, some smaller firms, it's harder to get that sort of diversity and connection. But I think I've been fortunate to work at pretty large firms where, it hasn't been less of an issue. But, within, like when I was doing investment banking, for the better part of 8 years, that's not a kind of diverse part of financial services, right? Like that's a lot harder, right? The overall firms might be, but that particular division was tougher in terms of like the diversity, for sure.
Now, I know that obviously with your new title right now, Director of Mergers and Acquisitions, Corporate Development at American Express. Now, first off, American Express is an amazing company to work for, right? But like that sounds like a very big job right there, and a very big title. So like, could you tell the listeners a little bit more about what exactly do you do?
Yeah, so I'm part of the team. Basically, we're a pretty small team. I'd say we're probably 12 to 15 people, top to bottom, and we are sort of responsible for leading all of the acquisitions, divestitures, joint ventures, and portfolio acquisitions on behalf of American Express across the globe, right? And so if you think about it, if American Express, if there's an acquisition or company that we want to acquire, our team is the one that leads the execution of that transaction. If we're selling a business or divesting parts of our business or assets, our team will lead that execution. We have several partnerships and joint ventures all over the world that we have to manage as well. And as part of our role, we oversee any transactions related to that, whether that's creating a joint venture, dissolving of a joint venture, any transactions related to it, like if the joint venture wants to acquire something, and then other just smaller card portfolio acquisitions because we are a financial institution. The great thing about it is we work across the firm, and we get access to senior leaders across the firm and get to be in the discussions as they think about strategy and how to grow the business and what are the opportunities that we should be exploring. And it's a great opportunity to get exposed to the firm overall, but exposure to senior leadership as well.
Now, with all this that you've been doing in corporate America, like what is something like a big accomplishment that you're proud of, that you have done over the many years?
I when I think about it, looking back, I think my biggest, a couple of things, aside from obviously my family, which I'm super proud of. I think it's when I graduated undergrad, I know that was a very big moment. One, for my family. When I went to college, that was a big moment. When I graduated, that was even a bigger moment because I was the first in my family to do it. I was also the first in my family to go back for an MBA. So when I decided to switch careers after wealth management, I went back for my MBA at Cornell. First person in my family to do that. And so I think just being able to do these things and kind of, I think, fulfill what my parents had hoped for in terms of, when everything they sacrificed for, all the hard work that they put in, yeah, I can recall them doing so much for us just to make sure that my sister and I had a better life. And I feel like the best way that I can pay them back is to try to be a better person myself and continue to progress, and be the person that I hope that they intended for me to be as I get older. And I think, just the hard work, the focus, the dedication. I mean, those are all the values that they instilled in me. And I hope that I'm an embodiment of all of that all their hard work and sacrifice in everything that I do. So for me, like, like it's, the career is great. And I still feel like I'm in the early innings of my career. I feel like in my head, I'm like, there's so much more I can be doing, which is why I'm excited about kind of where I'm at, and the company that I'm with. It's just, I think there's still a lot more to go and a lot more story to tell. But I think for now, it's just, knowing that I've navigated all this kind of by myself. I've been learning on the fly, had some missteps. You got to think, going back for an MBA, all that, like, I didn't know anything about that. I didn't have anyone to talk to. It was like, hey, I'm thinking about changing careers. I remember when I told my parents that, their initial reaction was, why would you do that? Why would you leave a steady job to go back to school? And it was in the middle of the 2008, 2009 recession.
Yeah.
They thought I was nuts.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you had you have a steady job, like you said, it's hard to leave and stuff.
Yeah. And for me, it was a no-brainer, but they didn't see it, but they were very supportive of it. And I think to this day, that's the best decision I ever made, was to go back to school, right? Like, Cornell is a great, renowned institution, opened up so many doors for me in terms of career-wise, going back to that MBA. And it's really propelled my career tenfold from where I was pre-MBA.
Now, something I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about, and I know I'm not sure if you have dealt with this type of situation, but I know some of the former guests have expressed, like, some very sensitive situations where they were at work, where they were might have been some type of hit with or met with some type of issues when it came down to being a minority, like inclining up that ladder, finding that voice, being able to voice and not be, taken advantage of. Did you feel like you have ever faced any of those situations in corporate America?
Yeah, I can't say that I have, honestly. But, I think, I don't think I've had to specifically face that. But what I think is important, and one of the things that, because I have like several friends that are in and around the industry that have done similar things, gone on similar paths. I think one of the things that we always talk about is the idea that, are we where we are just because we're diverse candidates, rather than the hard work and sacrifice and having the background for it. I think it's something that I know I talk with my friends who are in similar positions, and it's kind of always in the back, like, do people perceive you as being credible because of your talents, or because they think you might be there because of some other greater initiative and less on talent? I think is something.
Okay. Now, I know obviously working in corporate America, having to crunching numbers, doing the data entries and everything, like, what are some of the hobbies that you participate in? Like, what is something that you do outside of the office, that keeps you like strong mentally, when you're not at the office?
Yeah. So I think for me, I was in in an environment where I was working probably before my current role. When I was doing investment bank, I was probably doing 70, 80 hours a week, on call 24/7, right? It made it hard to have a very sustainable life balance. So there really wasn't much outside of work, even despite, I had a young family at the time. So there wasn't a ton of new stuff, right? Like, so any free time that I had was usually reserved for like just catching up on family and spending time with my family. I think today, with sort of a different change of pace, in my current role, definitely more got back into working out. I find that to be just a tremendous stress relief for me personally. Just the idea that waking up early, having an hour or two just to focus on mental and physical health, meditating, just quiet time to gather my thoughts. To me, that's extremely important. I probably sleep a lot less these days, but I still try to get a decent night of sleep and still so I can get up and get after it every day.
Mm-hmm.
So exercising, meditation, and just doing things not business, not finance related, just reading stuff for pure pleasure.
Truly, taking
my
moments.
My wife used to make fun of me. She's like, even when you're downtime, you're just reading finance books and stuff like that. Like, read something non-related to what you do. So I've tried to do more of that, and then quite frankly, my life now is a lot different in terms of the work-life balance. My oldest is at an age where he's now playing team sports. So the last 2 seasons, I've been coaching some of his teams, which has been a really great experience for me and an opportunity to spend some time with him. So making sort of those types of activities are really important to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, Elvin, I greatly appreciate you being on the show and all the information you shared with us, starting off from like where you were, family coming from DR, to kind of emphasizing about the work ethic. It definitely shows your work ethic from you climbing the corporate ladder, just doing some, simple data entry stuff, to then being where you are right now in the position that you are and developing and growing with that team. My last question to you is like, what type of advice would you give to a younger child, a younger kid listening to, our interview today with you, that's aspiring to be in like your career path?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like, it's seek out people who are doing what you want to do and just reach out. I think nowadays there's so many different tools. Right? LinkedIn was not around when I was in undergrad and trying to navigate my career very early on, right? So, but nowadays with things like LinkedIn and social media, it's so much easier to network with people. Like, you can find someone doing the role that you think you might be interested in and reach out. It's like, hey, I'm interested in what you do. I'd love to learn about your career and what it is you do. Right? And you'll find that people are very receptive to that. And so just if you have an interest or you're interested in learning more about them, just reach out to people. I think, when I was going through it, one of the things that I realized was like, there just wasn't someone that I could go to and talk to about some of these thoughts that I had, right? Like changing career paths or going back for an MBA, right? And so having someone that you can talk to is very important, even if it's a stranger, right? Or someone that you're just trying to learn about their own path, right? And how it might be similar to yours. I think just making those types of outbound connections is extremely helpful. And there's actually a lot of great organizations out there, looking for, Black and brown candidates that are looking to, really pursue sort of different career paths, right?
True.
Especially within the business community. I was part of an organization called Management Leadership for Tomorrow. Great program of, they started out as a prep program for kids looking to go back for an MBA. I was part of that, and they helped really prepare me for the process of applying to business schools and preparing to take your GMAT test and putting a proper application packet together. And there's all types of resources like that. And starting now, I think they've expanded. There's organizations that start at the high school level.
Yep. Sometimes even the middle school.
At the undergrad level. Yeah.
That is essential.
Because I think, so there's a ton of great organizations that you can be a part of, and to be quite frank, like, they're great networks to have, right? I've got great opportunities that came along just from being a part of these networks, right? Like, these are other people like-minded, right? Seek out like-minded people that are doing what you want to do and have a similar ambition. It's amazing what you can do when you get a group of people like that together.
That does help. significantly. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know that's something that, some of our guests have talked about as well, just being a part of those types of networks. I'm glad you mentioned LinkedIn. We did interview someone from LinkedIn, and they mentioned the same exact thing. Like, it's a very powerful platform in which young individuals and older individuals as well too, people looking to, start finding that voice could definitely utilize. So I appreciate you, Elvin, sharing and kind of educating us a little bit more about what you do and how you got from point A to point B. And I just want to again thank you so much for just being on the show and just expressing all these things. Very, very, very knowledgeable information, in which a lot of our listeners are going to appreciate. I want to let the listeners know, if you want to hear about more inspirational stories like Elvin, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow us on our social, Zaka Connect, and follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcast. Again, Elvin, thank you so much for being on the show.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully I was able to add some insight.